Yun. We're live again for another episode of HR Shouts and Whispers. Episode number 76 na tayo. And syempre, importante dyan, ano ba yung topic natin for tonight? Ang topic natin for tonight ay rethinking compensation in the next normal. Syempre, sobrang importante niyan, di ba? Dami natin matututunan ngayong episode na to. Syempre, my name is Ken Somera and ang main host natin, Cristina Reclamado. Hi, Chris!
Hi, Ken. Okay, so how's your Saturday?
Oo, syempre, lively. Syempre, lively.
Lively.
Yeah,
Okay,
G.
so, well, yeah, so actually, this has been a busy Saturday for me. Okay,
Mm.
so this morning, I have to say hi to, well, the MBA students of St. Paul QC. Okay, so we had a webinar this morning, okay, about the barriers of administrative professionals in communicating in the workplace. Okay, so I started my day early, okay, and then I'm sure our guests also had a busy Saturday. So let's welcome our guests. Okay, our guest is actually known, okay, to hold seminars on compensation and ER, and he is the managing director of Talent Reach. Okay, so I'd like to welcome with us Mr. Ronaldo Turla. Hi, Ron.
Hi, good evening to everyone here in HR Shout. Thank you for inviting me over, and I'm looking forward to this discussion.
So our topic is compensation. Okay, so Ken, any ideas? Okay, have you had questions from our community members about compensation? Yo, you are on mute.
Yes, nakamute pala ako. Yeah. Maraming questions na nakikita ko palagi, lalo na sa mga communities natin about compensation. Pero ako, syempre, non-HR, compensation. Ano ba? Parang ang lawak. Pero I'm interested to learn more. Di ba?
Yes. So actually, when you think of compensation, okay, along with employee discipline, okay, that's actually hairy and thorny and very fiery topic. Okay. So I'll turn to Ron. So okay, so what were the most common questions that you have received during this pandemic?
Well, I guess during the pandemic, yung mga questions that I was asked would be, of course, yung salary increases. No, is it going to happen during the pandemic, or yung mga cases of floating employees, or yung naka-forced leave, for example, what are they going to receive, for example? At the same time, for those who are really encountering difficulties sa companies, no, so yung mga cases of separation, computation for redundancy, retrenchment, etc., which again includes compensation. Kasi if you look at compensation in the practice of HR, generally it involves from hiring to firing, merong aspect ng compensation. So that's the reason why compensation is a very broad topic. Just like what Ken mentioned, it's a broad topic na it really involves the entire employment process. Kasi from the time you are hired, no, when you receive your salary, pag medyo regular ka na, and then eventually, you're performing, then of course you would be expecting some kind of increase from the company. Or in some cases, if you are really a top performer, then you will be expecting some kind of promotion, and yun na yung mga nagbe-build ng mga certain expectations from the employees. And of course, HR has to respond to it objectively, no, because HR is supposed to be in control of the compensation of the company through, of course, through the guidance of management also of the company. So
Yeah. So I agree with you. So actually, the most common questions in the HR forums are related to compensation.
mm,
Okay, so you have to remember that ever since the pandemic and the lockdown was declared last March 17, 2020. Okay,
mm,
a lot of concerns. Okay, it actually opened the Pandora's box. Eh.
mm,
Parang, okay, so pagka na gano pa, yung mga shifting schedule or broken schedule and reduced work hours, which are part of the flexible working arrangement,
yeah,
okay, mababayaran ba kami? And
yeah,
then, ito ang nakakatawa, Ron. Okay, so there's a
Mm,
new announcement from the president. So we do know we've received communication, a
mm,
presidential decree yesterday. Okay, and wala na yung mga December 24 and November 2. So
mm,
parang binawi daw, hindi na sila holidays, okay? So,
right.
a lot of questions then, okay, mababayaran ba kami, okay, on that days, okay? So,
Mm,
yun.
mm,
So you are right, okay? Whenever there are changes or movements in the employee status, okay,
mm.
it's always, okay, paano ka mababayaran and ano yung magkano yung ibabayad sa'yo. Those are the questions.
Yeah,
So,
because if I may just add, if you look at history, no, in terms of the parang presidents, for example, ang pinaka-famous yan is during the time of GMA or Gloria Arroyo, where she did the holiday economics, di ba, yung tinatawag nila. And then, parang every presidents would normally have their own stake in terms of the holiday. That's why it's very, it's a hot topic kasi yung holiday pay, for example, for a lot of people, they're really expecting. That's why when there are changes, it's important for the HR community to also be aware of how to respond to it kasi yun nga nagbabago yung treatment, no. That's why the common worker, for example, let's say a minimum wage earner, minsan yun yung nagiging question nila na kailangan sagutin ni HR because of the directives, for example, kailangan merong tamang implementation, or that's why we look forward to implementing rules and regulations coming, let's say, from DOLE, especially with regards to the holiday pay na ganyan.
okay. And so I'll just ask this, Ron. Okay, so
Hmm.
there are a lot of specialists, okay, in HR, okay,
Hmm.
and we have a specialist known as compensation specialist.
Yep.
Okay, so what makes this person different from the other specialists?
Okay. I might be biased in answering this question because I
Mm-hmm.
used to handle compensation specialist under my HR team before, no. So I would say, no, na compared with a recruitment specialist, a compensation specialist is somebody na normally talaga kailangan merong grasp of yung numbers, for example, and then there's attention to details, and then there's a lot of confidentiality with regards to the work that you're doing, because a lot of times when you're handling compensation, you are not allowed to divulge certain things, no? That's why in a way, you have to have a the person that you're going to hire should be mature enough to handle sensitive information regarding compensation. At the same time, a compensation specialist is different because you're handling basically yung rewards and the rewards aspect of the company, meaning you have the capacity to be able to influence the behavior of people. Ibig sabihin, di ba, for some people, whenever you're dealing with compensation, especially if you're handling mga payroll, for example, or benefits or even incentives, these people parang tends to be more parang respectful of you kasi alam nila na ikaw yung mag-handle, but at the same time, you also encounter a lot of questions. That's why a compensation specialist should be patient enough to answer questions and explain the theory in the practical side, no? Because syempre sa compensation, maraming mga terminologies na sometimes HR lang yung nakakaintindi, pero you have to be able to also explain it to a common employee or an ordinary person. So kailangan meron siyang patience to do that, na kung ano yung technical knowledge niya about compensation, then kailangan ma-explain siya dun sa isang employee. So I would say those are some of the differences na nakikita ko for a compensation specialist.
So, well, it's a very complex, okay, undertaking, okay, compensation, and there are skills involved. And tama ka, the compensation specialist has to have a certain maturity, okay, not to divulge confidential arrangements or even discussions. Kasi
Yes.
with compensation, syempre things are changing, the business environment is changing. So may effect 'yan with the company's profits, and of course the capacity to pay. So
Yes.
dapat may mga discussions kasi pwedeng hindi pa siya final or brainstorming stage pa lang. So
Mm.
those things cannot be divulged kasi may effect kasi sa tao magre-react. Alam naman natin 'yan. so,
Yes, yes.
so we have to be careful with you know kumbaga, we have to be careful about telling our friends or our colleagues within the
Mm.
organization na may pinag-uusapan tungkol dyan, etc.
Yep.
Also, to manage expectations. Kasi
Yes.
baka there was an instance in my career, okay, we were discussing certain, benefits, okay, to be
Mm.
enrolled. Tapos, we just had an employee engagement specialist, okay, in the team, and then nakwento niya, so may mga expectations na, of course, na nangyayari from employees. Pag hindi natuloy, then it becomes disappointment. So
Yeah.
yun yung that's what we're guarding against. But
Yeah.
and so our viewers are slowly, so they're coming in and then seeing the FB live. So I encourage all the viewers, okay? So you have been asking us questions about compensation, and this special feature on compensation will really help you. Okay, so now, so take advantage while Mr. Ron Turla is here. Okay. But anyhow, okay, so we have also compiled your questions in the past. Okay. And Mr. Ron Turla has been gracious enough to give a presentation. So I will give the floor to Ron, and then he will explain certain things about salary budgeting, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and then a little bit about compensation, okay,
Yep.
some theories and practices. So,
Okay.
Ron, I give the floor to you.
Okay. Thank you, Christina, for this. Okay. So let me just upload the. Okay. So I prepared some. Oops. Sorry. Okay. Um, since we're talking about parang salary increase or salary budget, so I'd like to talk about some aspects of increments or the increases. So increments, for example, could actually come in different forms. You can have fixed increment system. um, it could be based on actual peso value or even fixed percentage. So you could also have parang variable increment, no, na wherein there's in terms of salary increases. No? So these are types of annual increment. No? Pero let me jump into the when you look at, for example, yung salary progression curve, for example, when you determine the progression of a person's salary, especially assuming that there is a salary structure that you're following, you need to be able to classify the kinds of performance of people, whether they're excellent, good, or average, for example, and then match it with the progression. No? Because one of the things that we have to remember when in terms of providing salary increases that there should be a conscious planning of the salary progression. Why is that? Because whenever you implement, let's say, from new hires, let's say new entry rate, for example, if the company will manage the salaries of these employees, there has to be a progression that's happening within the employment period of that person. Some companies, for example, use anniversary dates or regularization dates as a basis for determining whether are you up for an increase, or if there is a policy of the company, then you can also follow if there's a scheduled type of increase. Some companies try to focus on a fixed date or fixed period of increasing, and then they don't allow for what we call, diba, parang off season. When you say off season, you don't normally accommodate increases that are recommended that are not within the certain period. No? So that's one way. If I will advise you, if you're listening right now, that's one way for you to control. Because if you will be allowing all types of increases within the year, for example, then it might also cause the salary structure to be affected or distorted at some point. No, that's why yung progression is an important element when you're managing your salary structure. Now, um, here's an example of yung increase versus the performance matrix. Okay, what do I mean by this? No, so you can come up with the matrix. No, most of the time when you're talking about salary increase, no, I would tend to use matrix to be able to help the company determine combining the performance rating at the same time the yung market value, no, in terms of how do you want to reward a person according to the performance that the person is providing, no? So this is one way of trying to establish yung tinatawag nating salary increase. The other way that I would also recommend would be doing yung comparative ratio. Okay, the comparative ratio analysis for most people, especially I normally discuss this in my webinars and seminars. No, the comparative ratio is your relationship of the midpoint of your salary structure to the market. Okay, so that's the reason why when you're trying to do salary increases, it's important not to start with the salary increase, but look first in terms of the market. What is the market providing? Because if you don't know exactly the difference or the relationship between how the market is paying and then what is the current salary of the employee, no, you would tend to just align or just increase a certain person's salary according dun sa what the person or what the supervisor or the manager recommended. So it's important for you to set policies, matrices like this, to be able to influence salary increases. Kasi without it, for example, you could be influenced or intimidated by your company, by the managers or department heads in your company to be able to give increase. So giving out certain increases is a very touchy subject or a touchy action for HR when it comes to providing. Kasi sabi nga natin, you'll have to set certain standards when you're giving out increases. Kasi, di ba, a lot of times I would normally encounter certain people saying na, bakit si ganitong person binigyan mo ng ganito, the other person wasn't given. So, then they would now try to compare, no, in terms of ano. So, doon na pumapasok yung tinatawag nating internal equity. No, the internal equity considers performance, skills, years of service, for example. So, we will have to be able to contend with the internal equity. That's why when you're managing a salary structure, for example, there has to be a point of review. Okay? Most of the time, I notice kasi for a lot of HR, whenever they manage the salaries of their employees, no, whenever they provide certain increases, there's no point of them reviewing. Okay? What do I mean by review? So salary reviews are normally good, especially if you're already managing a company with a salary structure, for example, and you have salary policies. You need to be able to review everything that happened or everything that's happened for the entire year so that you can project for the upcoming year. Okay, so if you would like to come up with yung tinatawag nating parang salary budget, for example, you need to be able to do a review first before you do the salary budget. Because if you don't do a salary review, for example, how can you propose to management what would be the upcoming or prospective increases and how will it be rolled out? So it's important for you to do a review every year. At least ang timing nito would be at least on the last quarter of the year, no, around October, November, December. So dapat by that time nagre-review si HR for the upcoming year in terms of ano yung expectations for the employees. Ayan. Okay, here's another example na I can say in terms of the yung market value computation din. So you have the low, medium, high. And normally yan, you can also use yung relevant experience that you can have. Diba? Let's say for example, if you're hiring a person, okay, titingnan mo rin yung kanilang relevant experience if there's significant, because work experience is one of the factors, compensable factors that is normally a basis for hiring beyond yung tinatawag nating minimum. When I say hiring beyond the minimum, di ba minsan meron kang mga employees na when you hire them because they have much more experience or they have other qualifications aside from what the job description is telling you. So that's why it's important, no? So let me just point out something, no? When you are trying to come up with a policy of hiring beyond the minimum, let's say, di ba, you hire a person, you hire them beyond the minimum, kailangan ng comparison mo doon is your job description. Hindi siya based lang doon sa person's, you need to be able to compare if the qualifications of the person exceeds that of the job description that you have set for the position, then that will be a basis for you to be able to really say, okay, we can hire you beyond, the hiring rate, especially if you are, parang justifying why would you hire that person more than, their contemporaries. Yun. So it's important for you to consider that. Now, when you talk about salary review guidelines naman, let me give you some pointers for this one. No? Yeah. So I hope everyone is listening here. No? So I think everyone is intently listening to this discussion. No? Now, for the overall cost guideline, when you set out your salary review guidelines, you need to set a budget. A percentage of payroll is imposed for merit review. So it is an essential thing that you and the managers uh, should, you should define who will, have a final decision. There is a recommendation, for example, coming from the managers, but ultimately HR becomes really the one to decide in terms of based on the salary structure. Now, in this case, you need to put in yung sinasabi nating mga maximum and minimum increases. Okay? So managers are told that they cannot give an increase of a certain amount, for example, na too high, no, could produce inequities, or too low, meaning that the increase is meaningless. So it is something for us to consider na kapag nagde-decide tayo about increases, it is not just parang following a certain recommendation, but it is really looking at the balance between the recommendation, what is the output that was provided by the employee, and I would always mention that whenever you're talking about increases for your employees, the two things that you have to watch out for would be, number one, the performance of that person, and second, was there an improved skill, or was there something that really improved in this person. That's the reason why you're rewarding them, because you'd want them to feel that because of the output that they were able to do, at the same time they were able to develop skill sets that previously they were not able to do. That is the point for the increases, so that it doesn't become like favoritism. It's all about the output. It's about the performance of that person, and if the person is able to justify that kind of those criteria. So those two criterias would negate the aspect of the tenure. Kasi 'di ba, most of the time employees would tend to believe na the longer I am in the position, I get entitled for certain increases. So to negate that, then you need to focus on performance and skill development. Because if you do that, most people will now feel na, okay, I have to perform in the job, and at the same time, I have to improve or develop my skills, because that is what will make the company convinced, to give me such increases. Without it, for example, if there is no marked improvement and there is no evidence of skill development, then parang ang question doon is, what are you trying to reward? Because remember, compensations or salary for that matter reinforces behavior. So since it reinforces behavior, you need to make sure that what you're giving is really equivalent to what they have provided. No, of course there will always be some parang sinasabi nila na sometimes they feel na hindi commensurate, no, but ang importante dito is that there is an effort made by the company to be able to give out the salary increases. Yeah. Okay. Here are some okay. Let me give you this guideline. No? So this one basically is an example of how you can try to put in the kind of increment, for example, no. And then if you look at this particular slide, no, you can see that um, when it comes to assessment, for example, depending on their performance rating, then you can have certain increments in terms of percentage. And if you look at certain aspects. No? So medyo this is very no, very straightforward. When you look at the assessment of unsatisfactory and needs improvement, for example, then that means that you really have to focus on people who needs improvement. No? Except that I notice, I don't know if you've been observing this. A lot of people, a lot of managers, for example, tends not to go into the needs improvement. No, a lot of people
I agree with you. I
has a tendency to go in terms of the average, no, simply to put things in perspective, no, but somehow whenever a manager fails to put the needs improvement, for example, he or she is sending the message to the other top performer, no, in the organization, that somehow may disparity, so it affects the management style of the manager. For example, when you talk about not addressing poor performers, for example, because I think as a manager, it's important for you to focus not just on the top performer, but also focus also on people who are not really delivering according to the expectations, so that you can be able to improve their performance. So at the end of the day, in terms of managing performance, a manager can be seen as effective to the extent that he's able to transform certain people to perform better than what they usually have been doing. So if you're that kind of manager, then I salute you. If you're that you can be an effective manager, because you're able to really parang transform people and motivate them. Salaries, for example, are a way of rewarding them or motivating them, but of course it's not the only the only way to motivate them. So which I think it's one of the questions that probably we can answer today, na what are other ways but to be able to motivate, or be able to really drive the performance of people. So Christina, my questions ba na or can I
Okay.
continue?
Well, you can continue, but I'll just make a comment. Okay. So,
Okay.
yeah. So, performance appraisal and salary policies, they're closely linked. Okay.
Yep.
And actually, I like this part and thank you for mentioning that. Okay. Because this is actually the part where the salary adjustments, okay, that companies give employees become meaningful. Okay. Because when line managers do their work during performance appraisal. Okay,
Hmm.
so you are able to separate the performers from the non-performers,
Yes.
and often than not, okay, this is where the real HR work happens. Okay,
Hmm.
because the real people management task is actually okay done by line managers, and this missing out or not skipping this part or just saying I don't want to be able to have a conversation with my staff about his performance, so I'll just put satisfactory in everything. So you are now missing out on your role as a line manager of being a real coach to your staff.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. I
So
agree.
that's
I agree with that. Yeah.
so that's just my comment. So
Okay.
thank you for linking the two, performance appraisal and salary review and salary adjustments.
Yeah. And kumbaga parang that is really a skill that has to be developed between the line managers and at the same time for HR. Ayan. Okay, so far I've talked about ways of doing salary increases, no, and salary increases could be varied, no, when it comes to salary increases could be because of performance, no, because of the merit pay, no, but there are also salary increases that could be born out of adjusting the salary structure that you have in the company. Okay, so those are certain parang increases that you can talk about. Now, let me also share. Hold on, let me just stop sharing first and then go to. Okay, I'd like to share also with yeah, since we're talking about yung salary increase, here is a sample uh, of like a matrix, that I've prepared. No? So if you look at this merit matrix for all employees, if you're looking at trying to come up with a budget for your salary increases, you can see that you'll have to really look at the high performance and the low performers in the company, and then try to identify an actual budget increase, no, that you can be able to submit or recommend to management based on certain items, no? Like the number of employees that you have, looking at their total base pay, no, and then what would be a possible increase based on their performance, no. So all of this should be considered so that you can come up with what would be the ideal matrix, no. And since we're talking about yung HR budget, no, let me show you a sample lang of how a certain budget could be done. No? So if you look at this example, you can see that when you look at, let's say, a list of employees, no, and then you look at the ratings that they have as well as their annualized base pay, you can see that you'll have to consider kung ano yung kanilang annual salary compared with their annual comparative ratio to determine the increase that they will have. No? So from there, you should be able to budget, no, a sort of a total number or total figure as to how much you're going to look at the increase for a set of employees. So you'll have to consider, for example, the performance rating or the matrix that I've mentioned earlier, and then allocate a certain budget for it. So normally, when you allocate a budget for salary increases, try to estimate for the highest, for example, no, na pwedeng ma-receive ng employee when you're talking about salary increases. Kasi, di ba, when it comes to budgeting, since it is a parang prospective, it is parang allocating, sabi nga natin. When you're talking about budget, it's allocating for certain increases. So that's why if you're looking at, for example, how many potential increases would be given, look at the previous performance appraisal rating and then allocate a certain amount that will be provided, no, that can be used for the upcoming year, no. So from there you should be able to more or less parang set a certain budget for your company as to ano yung total percentage nyo. So, when you talk about the percentage of increase, ano, so, kinakailangan magkaroon ka ng total projection first before you say ilang percent ba yung increase natin for next year. Kasi, most of the time, when you look at, let's say, di ba, yung sinasabi natin annual projected market increase, for example, it is expressed in percentage. So, it is expressed in percentage kasi ang pinanggagalingan niya would be the total projected salary increases. So, you'll have to be able to compare that versus, year after year, for example, para makita mo kung magkano ba talaga yung i-increase ng salaries of the employees for the upcoming year. So, dito papasok talaga yung connection ng performance appraisal administration mo at the same time implementing your salary structure. So that's why it's important when you're trying to do a salary budget, it's important for you to consider, number one, kamusta yung performance appraisal administration mo. Ibig sabihin, was the performance appraisal done correctly? Meron ka bang mga questions na kailangan itanong? Kasi madalas sa HR, napapansin ko, ang nagiging role ni HR pagdating sa performance appraisal, nagko-collect lang siya, nagsa-summarize lang siya ng performance appraisal, pero wala nang analysis na nangyayari, for example. So, in this case, it is important for HR to look at the numbers and to see what the numbers are telling you. Okay? Because sometimes if you are not analyzing what your managers are giving you, for example, and then you don't also connect that with the business, no? It takes away yung objectives ng performance management. Kasi ang performance management tied up with salaries is supposed to, of course, reward people, at the same time be the basis for personal employee movements. But more than that also, performance management should be able to connect if the company was able to accomplish its objectives. So that's why, pag na-accomplish yung objectives as a company, then meron na siyang capacity to reward or to be able to give out increases. Minsan yun ang hindi napapansin ng HR, na in a way parang you're just following kung ano yung sinasabi or binibigay na appraisal rating ng mga employee. So we need to be able to connect different factors pagdating sa salary increase budget kasi you'll have to consider kumita ba yung company, kamusta ang revenue for example. At the same time, you look at the productivity of departments, the individuals for example. Kamusta yung absences natin, tardiness for example. Are people really meeting their objectives, for example? So all of these are tied up eventually to talking about the salary increase budget. That's why as HR, I think you are in the position, especially if you're provided with this type of data, kailangan mag-step up na rin tayo as HR because somehow if we just accept the information, ang nangyayari na nagiging tendency natin is we become too administrative, especially when it comes to performance and compensation. For me, performance and compensation is one of the strategic areas of HR na kailangan gamitin mo yung data to influence people's behaviors, attitudes, for example. Kasi otherwise, if you don't, you're missing out on trying to become strategic for them, influencing them in terms of being part of the company or trying to motivate them, for example. So all of this, talk about salary increase budget, no? So meron siyang connection in terms of yung strategic nature ng HR sa business. So if you again go back to yung role ni HR lang being an administrative expert, no? Ang iisipin mo lang is basically tatanggapin mo lang yung mga performance appraisal rating or kung merong mga recommendation for the salary increases, hindi ka na magtatanong, hindi ka na mag-analyze for example. So you are missing out on certain things na you could assert yung role ng HR sa company. Yun. So I hope na nakuha natin yon because otherwise yun nga nagiging very administrative. Merong administrative part kasi itong performance at yung salary increases eh. Pero I hope na nakikita natin as HR that we can really step up if we only understand how to analyze the numbers and the data. So dito na papasok yung upscaling natin as HR na we are not just basically here to administer a form, or let people send us a paper na papa-approve lang, for example, but we are here to be able to give proposals, give recommendations, for example, to employees and also to management.
Ron, I'll just ask this question. Okay, this is from Miss Carmela Castaglione Ambion. Okay, so hi Carmela. Okay, so what if the company is suffering from losses or is in a loss position? Is annual salary increase, can it still be given, especially if there's no increase for the past 3 years?
Okay. This is how I'll answer that question. So, if you're experiencing, di ba, yung pandemic, for example, it's important for you to establish your pay policies regarding instances where the company is not capable of providing. No? So, options for you if you are not able to provide salary increases is to actually use yung COLA or cost of living allowances. Okay? Yung COLA is a way for you to augment some people's salaries without making it really eventually part of their salaries. No? So you could use COLA or in my experience, we have used yung tinatawag namin parang economic increase. Yung economic increase, para siyang ano yung pinakamababang increase na pwede
Mm-hmm.
mo maibigay sa employees mo without really, parang hurting your bottom line or hurting na, kumbaga, ano lang yung kaya mong ibigay. So, in that case, it's important na ilagay mo siya sa policy mo because one thing we realize right now, especially because of the pandemic, that things like this will happen to us. So the question is, what will the company do? So kailangan dito maging very strategic si HR pagdating sa paggawa ng policies kasi yung mga madaling mag-create ng policy when you're talking about increases, for example. Pero truth of the matter is, if the company is not able to pay, ano yung pwede mong isagot dun sa employee? So pwede mo namang sabihin na wala tayong increase for the year, for example. Pero how will people understand that? 'Di ba?
Mm-hmm.
So kasi yun yung madalas itatanong nila na okay, so kasi nag-pandemic or parang or sometimes kung hindi kumita, for example, some companies are transparent enough to say na for this year we will not be able to so and that has to be written clearly in the policy of the company kasi kailangan yung policy ng HR pagdating sa pay is not only when times are favorable, but also when times are not favorable to the employees. Kasi para maging balanse. Kasi di ba minsan nagiging parang contention sa HR is that parang kumbaga bakit hindi nagbibigay ng increases on certain years. Hindi nila maintindihan simply because hindi nako-communicate minsan sa kanila na hindi kumita yung company, hindi masyado naging progressive for this year. That's why the company is not able to provide. So, kaya si HR dapat meron siyang way to be able to put that in the policy na kapag kinommunicate sa mga employees yung mga guidelines, for example, may mga cases na kung walang capacity yung company to pay, then you have the right, the company has the right not to give. Or if magbibigay siya, ano ba yung pwede niyang ibigay? So, yun yung mga options na pwede mo i-consider kung hindi ka makakapagbigay talaga, if at all, for this year. Or for,
So Ron, let's summarize that. Okay, so actually, with our small BPO, what we did
hmm,
before the pandemic,
hmm,
actually we had an economic increase. So
hmm,
actually, you're correct. So it was actually just an estimate kung ano yung COLA. Okay,
yeah,
so yun yung estimate na binibigay namin, especially upon regularization.
yes,
Okay. So you hire somebody. So kasi you have to understand that you have to be also competitive with your salaries to
hmm,
be able to hire the right talent. Kaya nga strategic. Okay.
yes,
And by the way, I'll just read Carmela's reaction to your points. Okay. So good points to HR to be strategic on performance management. Thank you. Okay. So going back, so yun yung sinasabi natin na we start from the very beginning. Okay. So when
hmm,
people are hired, you have to be transparent already with your policies. And one of the things, okay, that you can use as a come on are your pay policies,
yeah,
especially how you're treating increases. So they need to be able to see that they have a life or a future or a career in your company. Yon.
correct,
So you have to start from the very beginning. So that's why recruitment is crucial, okay, as a means to communicate with the employee and to also orient the employee on these kinds of policies.
yes.
So just to add, Ron. So please go ahead with your presentation. It's very interesting and very insightful.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, just to continue lang, no, dun sa mga diniscuss ko so far in terms of the salary budget aspect, ano. So, more or less parang na point out ko na yung mga aspects ng questions about the salary increase and then the matrix that you can use, no? And yung pinakita ko kaninang template sa inyo would be something that you can follow in terms of providing a salary budget, for example. And with the question kasi, for example, no, yun nga, if a person or if an employee can still clamor for an increase despite na ano, so the way that HR can be able to let the person know about yung not addressing the salary increases is, again, you look at the pay policies of the company. At the same time, you look at ano yung performance appraisal ng employee during that time, no? So from there, pwede kang mag-create ng mga other ways, no, na that you can say na pwedeng magkaroon ng increment, no. Ako ang nakikita ko dito is somehow if not the entire salary would be improved, no. So you can go towards benefits as a form of compensation and at the same time incentives, no. Ito kasi yung hindi masyadong nakikita ngayon ng employees, particularly because of the pandemic, na since walang salary increases, ang other options na pwedeng gawin ng management is to really come up with incentives that are really tied up to the performance that can actually generate, diba, cash, no? Parang in the form of increases. Pero in this case, it's not tied up to the basic pay, but it's really tied up to the performance of that person. So that's why it's important right now for HR to look at really ano yung mga tinatawag nating mga performance measures, like, di ba, yung ginagamit nating term na KPIs, for example. The KPIs, for example, has been shown to influence to a certain extent yung capacity ng company to be able to be objective whenever giving out, let's say, incentives or even salary increases. So I would suggest that you consider looking at measuring the performance of your employees, no, and then really start to see kung ano yung pwede niyong i-reward for that person na nakikita niyo na may significant significant improvement dun sa kanilang trabaho. Because most of the time, yung nakikita natin right now, when it comes to really salaries, for example, remember the basic pay is what you're giving to the employee in performing the job that they're doing right now. So remember, an employer is not in any obligation to actually, no, I mean, if we talk about legally, wala siyang obligation to actually increase the salaries of the employees except kapag nakikita niya that something is favorable for that person and also for the company. Kasi pag tinignan natin, di ba, yung basic pay, it's clearly indicated in the employment contract kung ano yung binigay sa'yo or inassign sa'yo na salary, for example. So, now, of course, if there are favorable policies of the company with regards to pay practices, then that is what makes employees really more engaged or, more parang attracted really to staying in the company. Parang it's a retention tool, sabi nga natin. Okay? But more than that, I think companies nowadays, because of the pandemic, has to be more creative, not just on the basic pay, but now focusing on incentives as well as improving their benefits. Kasi somehow the benefits, because of yung health crisis that we have right now, becomes also important for the employee. Di ba? Yung mga leave benefits, the HMO, or other allowances like medical allowances could actually form part. No? So in a way, that could solve some of the concerns of certain employees pagdating dun sa mga needs that they have right now, more than just looking at the basic salary. So in the long run, I can see that in companies, dapat mas magkaroon sila ng balanse, no? Yung tinatawag nating total compensation. So the total compensation should already reflect not just how the company would increase the basic pay, but also how benefits and incentives will now be parang at parity with the basic salary. Kasi madalas yan, di ba, malaki ang portion ng basic salary sa total compensation. Pero because of this situation that we're in right now, companies need to consider paano ko kaya pwedeng balansehin na I could introduce other incentives na not necessarily having to always increase the basic pay. Kasi nga, if times are hard, no, business owners would tend to, wag muna tayo mag-increase ng salary kasi permanent yan eh. Ibig sabihin, parang it will stay on with that person. And sometimes, needless to say, malaki talaga nagiging karga niya pagdating sa, total, di ba, malaki yung impact na sa revenue pag tinignan natin. Kasi for business owners, lagi nilang tinitingnan yung magkano yung payroll cost ko, for example. Kapag increase ako ng increase ng salaries, no? Siyempre, tumataas din yung expectations for the revenues. And ultimately, pwedeng, kung hindi man revenue yung tinitingnan, siyempre yung profitability. Minsan yung salary increases natin would also affect the profitability of the company. Kasi kung increase ka ng increase ng salary sa employees, pero pag tinignan mo, hindi siya ganun ka-productive, for example, then you might be towards the lines of parang people become entitled to salary increases,
Yes.
but not anymore showing na, okay, I'm productive or I can really deliver, or if the company has to tighten its belt, no, then tatanggapin ko na hindi mo na ako magkakaroon increase. So you need to be able to influence that to employees para hindi nila isipin na mahirap na nga yung panahon right now and then I would be expecting salary increases. So kailangan meron akong adjustments na gagawin din as an employee. So it is again, no, dito mo makikita yung employer-employee relationship. It's a test whether the employee, no, really is motivated to protect the employer at this point, because it's basically the employer giving him or her income in this case, no? So kung hindi niya paprotektahan yan, for example, and then magkakaroon siya ng entitlement mentality na, you have to give me the increases, for example, then ultimately it will impact the entire company na, parang minsan na-force na lang yung company to be able to give despite the fact na baka hindi niya na rin kaya in this case, no? That's why it could lead to, closure, or to, to other negative situations. Yeah. So yun yung mga, I think, we have to watch out for.
Okay, Ron. So, I guess kasi during this time, okay, we can say conservatively, okay, companies might be holding out on doing the increases on the basic salary.
Yeah.
However, they might introduce certain they may introduce certain interventions to motivate people. Okay, so incentives which are, well, actually, these are not naman, ano they cannot, they parang ang tinatawag dito, introduce it, and then maybe in the, it's not permanent. Okay, just
Yes.
to spur the motivation. Okay, or to kumbaga i-motivate naman or i-reward yung mga employees, so at least
Mm-hmm.
there's effort from the company. Okay, however, okay, at the end of, from the employees, and they should do away with the mentality that they are entitled to this. Okay, kasi
Yes. Mm-hmm.
mahirap na nga yung panahon, 'di ba? Kasi, businesses have certain, well, have very, realistic constraints now. Okay,
Yes.
so we have to understand the situation as well. I remember also this week kasi somebody asked me about, okay, so HMO, okay, can a
Mm-hmm.
company, so his company, okay, sent out a communication to all employees that for this year, yung HMO will be stopped. So he was
Mm-hmm.
asking me if the company is legally, okay, can legally do so.
Mm-hmm.
So my answer is because HMO, they're not mandatory benefits. So the
Mm-hmm.
company may do so. Kasi depende yan sa sitwasyon ng company nyo. Kung talagang nakita nila na they can do away with the HMO, okay, without
Mm-hmm.
hurting the others, okay, like your salary, okay, regular salary, you're still on your schedule Monday to Friday or Monday to Saturday, then they can make that decision. So that's my
Yes.
take on it, okay? Because we also did that when we were scouting for a better HMO. So we
Mm-hmm.
stopped the old one because we
Mm-hmm.
didn't like the contract, okay,
Mm-hmm.
because it was something that was done before I came in. And
Mm-hmm.
then we stopped it for 3 months, okay. We spoke to employees that we will scout for a better HMO for within 3 months, and then
Mm-hmm.
after 3 months we were able to get a better deal from another
Yeah.
HMO. So that's a scenario. That's a judgment call from management.
Well, I think no, just to comment on what you mentioned about the HMO. For me, no, yung whenever I've encountered this also kasi in some seminars that I've conducted na nagtatanong yung participant whether kung medyo hirap yung company, yung HMO ba could be taken out, no. So ako kasi ang take ko kasi diyan is that it requires good communication to employees regarding how you would implement that kasi a lot of people would always mention na sir, 'di ba benefit na siya in the company, so if it's reduced, for example, they always bring up the issue of article 100, yung non-diminution of benefits, no. But I always tell them na yung non-diminution kasi, for example, um, has to be intentional. For example, ibig sabihin talagang may motive yung company to take away certain benefits na hindi siya kinommunicate. Kumbaga parang silently, parang tinanggal lang siya. But in this case, if it's a pandemic, for example, and you're the management, and you feel na talagang kailangan nyo magtipid or you have to, you have to reconsider the cost, for example, then you can actually tulad yung ginawa mo, for example, you try to look for other providers who can provide better service. I think that's a good move for management, for example. Kasi ibig sabihin yan, the fact na you are trying to look after better service or better deals for the employees. So, if it's communicated proper to the employees, I think it will be received well. No? Malaking bagay din na the HR should be able to send the right message. No? Kasi minsan, si HR can be sometimes confused, especially pag sa ganyan. Because remember, as an HR, you're still an employee. Meron ka pa ring side na you're an employee of the company. That's why, iisipin mo pa rin na kapag nawala yung benefit na yun, it's you who will be also affected by that particular benefit. But in this case, if you're an HR, you have to be able to balance the role between you trying to protect the interests of the employee at the same time ano ba yung kino-consider mo sa management in terms of yung present situation. Yan. So, yeah, I think that's a good that's a good take on the HMO aspect.
Yes. Because sometimes depende 'yan kung depende 'yan sa mga nagbibigay sa ng mga proposals, 'di ba? And
Mm,
then it's actually non-diminution, I agree. Okay, the intent of non-diminution is really to it's something underhanded. Okay, let's just be
mm,
frank about it. And if you are your management is somebody who's studying naman options, then
mm,
certain benefits like the HMO, which is really not mandatory, it can
mm.
be postponed. Okay, yun lang
Yes.
naman yung atin. So Ken, I think Ken has a question.
Yeah, we have a question from Mr. Ernesto Espinosa. All right. So the question is, how do you address compa-ratio distortion in the salaries of employees in the age of the pandemic?
Mm.
So do you really have to follow Compa-Ratio? Like,
Well,
yeah.
for me, yung, of course, yung compa-ratio is, di ba, yun nga, sabi nga natin in terms of the distortion that's happening, um, in the ideal setting, you'd really want your compa-ratio to influence how you're going to pay your employees, no, versus the market in this case. But depending on how responsive you are as a company in terms of the comparative ratio. So, kasi yun nga, di ba, meron tayong tinatawag na lead or lag or match strategy, di ba? Sabi nga natin in terms of addressing the market. So, when you talk about leading the market, that means that your company, for example, has the capacity to be able to compete, no, for talents in the market. Um, I think, no, some companies now would tend to follow the lag strategy because if they're really not capable of addressing kung ano yung demand ng market, they somehow they could actually lag, the market itself for a certain period until such time that they're able to recover or even parang come back to yung dun sa the normal, sabi nga natin, normal situation, no, or you can just simply, di ba, create a certain match depending on the capacity to pay of a certain employer. So I think those things have to be considered when it comes to yung using the comparative ratio. Kasi sabi nga natin, the comparative ratio is a way to analyze the salary data or the market data that let's say you have studied the market data for you to be able to identify kung ano yung increase or progression ng salaries for employees, then you can use the comparative ratio analysis. But if at the end of the comparative ratio, makita natin na ultimately yung bottom line mo parang hindi kakayanin, then you'll have to have an alternative for it as well. Yun. So,
Well, for me, kasi realistically speaking, okay, like for example, small, medium enterprises, it might be expensive for them to really follow your compa ratio or, to try to
yes.
be a leader, okay, when
Yeah.
giving out salary. So they might opt to be, maybe for the time being while they're building their company, they might want to lag, to be a
Yes.
lagger, okay?
Yeah.
So that is actually how to, it's just a guide for me.
Right, right. Correct.
Yeah. So here, his follow-up question. Okay. So hi, Sir Ernie. Okay. So he's the former PMAP
Hi.
president.
Hi,
Okay.
sir. Hi, Sir Ernie.
So he's one of the former PMAP presidents. So
Yeah.
hi. So shouldn't compa ratio be always maintained with COVID or with no COVID?
Hmm. Well, that's an interesting question, ano? Because sabi nga natin, parang kung titingnan natin to, the COVID is basically, for a lot of us, it's the first time that we encountered it, no? I would say, in terms of whether there's COVID or not, comparative ratio, I mean, the compa ratio, for example, kasi is a way to be able to address yung response ng company to the market. So, I would say you can still consider it, except na for now, it might not be what will influence or what will be your basis for the salary increases. So it's really, di ba, if it's a, let's say if it's a survival mode for the company, then I think, di ba, parang you'll have to consider another factor to determining kung magbibigay ba ng increase or hindi na magbibigay ng increase during that time. So for me, that's my take in terms of whether there should be parang a focus on the comparative ratio for COVID or not, whether there's no COVID.
for me, what a company can do, especially for compensation specialists, is they can monitor, okay, what their competitors are doing, okay, maybe
Mm.
invest, okay, in a benchmark study, okay,
Yes.
to actually do salary review still. Okay, so to be
Yes.
updated, okay, but in order to implement a salary adjustment, they can put that on hold.
Yes.
So,
Correct.
so I think to answer the question, well, Compa-Ratio and the principles that we're discussing here, okay, it doesn't mean that it's because there's COVID we should be relaxed. Okay,
Mm.
we are still going to do our job, but
Mm.
whether to release the increase, okay, that maybe we will not be able to release the increase. So that's the
Mm.
answer to it.
Then tsaka minsan kasi ano eh, parang if you project kasi, let's say the comparative ratio, I remember in my case before when we were trying to identify parang a set of increase, we tried to look at the next 2 to 3 years, for example. So the next 2 to 3 years, for example, projected increase might happen, for example, depending on, of course, certain factors, no, such as, for example, yung profitability of the company, and
Yes.
in this case, kung because of the COVID happening to us, for example. So, it remains to be a projection. At least meron kang pwedeng balikan na during this time, you were able to project something. Pero as to whether it was implemented, pwede kang mag-refer back to a certain time na hindi siya na-implement. And probably there are reasons bakit hindi siya na-implement. So, at least alam mo yung paano yung galaw ng salaries ng company year after year para you can monitor and
Yeah.
control also at a certain point.
Yes, so we can still do those kinds of studies, okay?
Mm.
Yun na nga, it's a question of releasing it to employees. Yun.
Yes.
Okay. And then, okay, so there are also other questions that have lingered, okay, ever since March, okay?
Mm.
And Ron, what is your take on this clamor of employees, okay, for allowances that will cover electricity and internet expenses?
Okay. This is my take on it, no? Especially for the ones na, of course, work from home, no? If you look at it kasi, remote work, for example, has different types of parang arrangement, no? Meron kang tinatawag na parang full-time remote. Meron ka namang parang semi-remote, for example. So, I would tend to agree na if you allow a person to go talagang full remote, ibig sabihin parang very minimal yung kanyang going to the office, no? And if you notice, if you're in the office, of course, the company is spending for electricity and also for internet services, no? So in this case, you can translate that into an allowance for certain employees, and you can come up with policies for that. You can integrate that with a person's compensation package. So if you can, for example, na-compute mo naman that it can be, realistic for certain people in the company, then you can come up with a certain and ang kailangan lang doon is that alam mo kung hanggang kailan yung provision for such, let's say if, electricity, siguro a portion of it, not the entire total, so parang it's really more of subsidizing rather than really parang accommodating kasi remember, when you're talking about employee salary, um, kino-consider mo kasi siya eh. I mean, whenever you're talking about salary increases, one of the things that you have to consider is the personal budget of that person. Meaning, saan ba niya ginagastos yung pera niya, for example. And to a certain extent, kung remote worker ka, so definitely, since of course you'll be spending for increased, time at home, for example. So definitely may expenses na you'll be incurring because of that. So in that case, since it's work related, then I think it would be realistic naman for the company to be able to provide some form of allowance or subsidy for the person. So kailangan lang isulat mo siya in a guideline format na meron kayong agreement that this particular, let's say, allowance or subsidy is as long as the person is doing remote work. Kasi, di ba, makikita natin ngayon na may potential na in the next coming years, pwedeng maging hybrid yung ating work arrangement na merong remote, meron ka rin, di ba, parang going to the office, for example. So, in that case, depending on what the situation of the employee is, then yun yung allowances, for example, would be catering, or at least parang solving the person's particular concern with regards to expenses.
Yun. So, and then, kasi there's like, we have to also, really, again, this is like something that management needs to undertake, okay,
Mm,
as a team of managers, okay?
mm,
Kasi what happened during the pandemic was HR was actually left. I get this impression, okay, because of the questions that HR was left to decide on this, on these
mm,
things, okay.
mm,
But you see, if you had a crisis management committee, okay, you
mm.
would have the COO and the HR, okay,
Yes.
uh, meeting on a regular basis, okay, to address, okay, cert because you need to make, to be able to make adjustments in the workplace, okay. So you guys should be meeting on a regular basis. Okay, Ron, there's a follow-up question. So again, from Mr. Ernie, okay, for example, if your compa-ratio average is 60%, what will you do as a company, especially if you are in an industry that is too competitive?
Oh wow. So if the compa ratio is, I think, 60%, so that means na you're really falling below, no? So I think in this case, you need to consider kung kasi ang comparative ratio, for example, if it falls below 100% technically, parang yung competitiveness of your salary is falling behind, no? But if it's already 60%, I think it is due for the company to be able to make some significant adjustments for the person or for the employee, given this period. So I think it will be a difficult move for the company. Pero kung 60% yan, kailangan medyo umangat na yung comparative ratio natin to at least between 70 to 80% in terms of yung competitiveness. Kasi that's what the comparative ratio is telling us, di ba? So in that case, I think the company has to make some significant adjustments for the employee kung nasa 60% yung comparative ratio.
Yes, so it's actually, this is like a parang a way to evaluate, okay, and then see if it's worth doing that, okay. Yun lang
Mm,
yun. It doesn't mean na bawal, okay. It
yeah,
just means, okay, does the company afford it, and can the company sustain it?
correct. Kasi I mean, whenever you, of course, diba, sabi nga natin, when you give increases, there are consequences to the increases that you're giving. So, may implications yan sa performance, may implications din sa how you're going to treat other cases in the company, yung employees, yung different cases in the employee scenario.
Okay, so I think that wraps up. So we'll go to the realm of freelancers. Okay, so there's a
Mm,
question here about, okay, so actually on freelancers, it's actually quite, it's much easier. But okay,
mm,
so from Ash, okay, our management po kasi is informing me na applicable ang 10% tax sa any payment that freelancers receive even below 20,800. Example,
mm-hmm,
allowances 500 a day, so
mm-hmm,
yun, 500 times 10 days, so and then there's a 10% na ililess sa tax.
mm-hmm.
Can you help us? Can you help enlighten us if it this is okay? Okay, and what is the treatment on regular employees? Do they have 10% withholding tax?
Well, for me, no, I've seen companies na because of the pandemic and because of yung the occurrence of freelancing, certain companies really allow employees to go to have side jobs, for example, or parang freelancing opportunities, no, simply to augment their salaries, or if they, if they're pursuing a certain business, as long as it again doesn't conflict, no, with the main business of the company. So definitely that's already the norm for companies na they can allow employees as long as they can manage yung kanilang workload at the same time yung time, ano. With regards to the you mentioned about the percentage.
Yeah,
The
so it was like I think this has something to do like I don't know her job, but for
okay.
VAs and then ESL
Mm,
teachers, okay. So when you have a certain when you receive a certain fee, okay. So uh first is during recruitment, the recruitment officer tells you to
mm,
actually get apply at BIR as a freelancer.
mm-hmm.
So you have the core, COR, and then
Yeah.
this one, okay, gets stamped at the BIR, and then
Yeah.
you have your receipts, okay?
Yes.
Because if you don't do that, okay, what happens is you will be charged a 10% withholding tax.
Mm-hmm.
Vis-a-vis, if you go through that process, you have the option to be charged 8%
Right. Cor-
because your income level is less a certain amount. I believe
Yes.
it's around 250,000.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
250,000. Yep.
Yes. So you have that option. So in the long run, going through that process, you are your your salary or there's the fee that you get as a service provider, an independent service provider. Okay, it's just charged 8%, and then once a month you just give you just have to turn over a receipt
Yes. That's
to
correct.
the company. So that's the process. So I'm
Right.
not sure about your arrangement with your freelance job. Okay, so you have to iron it out with the HR or the admin of
Mm.
that company. So
Yep.
there.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
with the regular employees, okay, so there is a table, okay, you can compute your withholding taxes, okay.
Mm.
So but those that receive a salary of 20,833, okay,
Mm.
they are not imposed a withholding tax.
Correct. Yep. Yep.
So
Correct.
those that's taxation, okay.
Another interesting topic for another episode.
Oh, another episode na yan. Okay, but those are the nuances of taxes. Okay, so
Yeah.
it's different. So if nowadays you mentioned about the side gigs, okay, so another way actually that companies go about it, okay, so medium-sized companies and smaller ones, okay, they do allow their employees to sideline as long
Mm.
as it doesn't compete with
Yep.
the employee hours, or of course cannot it cannot be used as an excuse, okay,
Yeah.
for not working. So there, so you mentioned, okay, that this one, if should there be an instance, I think the HR of the company, hindi na siya substituted filing of the HR
Mm-hmm.
pagka naging ganon. Kasi yung employee na ang gagawa ng kanyang tax filing.
Yes, that's right. Because of course, but the tax is the obligation of the employee to ano to report. Yep.
Oo. Kasi you see, if you look at the form, especially the 2316, it
Mm.
says there that you declare under the penalties of perjury that
Mm.
you only have one employer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's the purpose of that, because if you have side gigs, then you have to do the filing yourself. So
Correct.
this requires transparency between the employee and the employer.
Yes.
Oh. Mhm. Kasi kami, we had that option. There was an option before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Actually, if you ask me, Ron, we
Mm.
already closed our BPO
Mm.
because of there were a lot of obstacles already. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
However, okay, as a last ditch effort, we allowed our employees to have sidelines.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then if they actually become regular with their sidelines, eventually we will have to have them file their taxes on their
Mm-hmm.
own. So
Yes.
that's the kasi ano na yan, consolidated filing na yan ng taxes nyo.
That's right. That's right.
So that's like just basics of taxes, okay. Okay, so how about you, Ken? Okay, so there's another, okay, Compa-Ratio. Okay, so because Ernie actually wrote a textbook on strategic management. Okay,
Mm.
there. So I think moving up to the Compa-Ratio to at least 80% will do the trick. He says it doesn't have to be near 100%, and then make adjustments through other ways. What do you think about that?
Yeah, for me, I think that might be the right move to make, especially if you notice na talagang lagging behind yung comparative ratio. So, putting it up at 80% would be competitive enough, especially if it's really a crunch time for the company or because of the pandemic. So, that kind of move will already be appreciated by the employee, given na mahirap yung situation. Probably kung iba yung situation natin, I think it would be more ideal to raise it at least 90% rather than 80%.
Okay, so let's talk about compa-ratio because our viewers might not understand compa-ratio.
Mm.
Okay, so we have the leaders. Okay, so these are the ones that are offering, okay, based on the market rates.
Mm.
Okay, is that, am I correct? 120% to 100%. Okay, that's a leader. Okay,
Yep. Mm.
okay, and then if you are uh, just matching, okay, it will be between 80 to 90%.
Yeah, between, well, at least 90 to 100%, that is a match strategy, no, na most companies, especially yung mga, so yeah, small to medium enterprises, would aim for the 90 to 100% comparative ratio. For especially if you have identified kung ano yung mga critical positions that you have in the company, then you can identify kung ano yung comparative ratio that you'd want them to have versus the market. So, yung having at 70 to 80%, that's already a good a good comparative ratio. And then pwede mo rin kasing gawin is that you can look at the current level excuse me, level of performance of the employees versus yung comparative ratio na pwede mong i-apply sa kanila. Yeah, so depending on whether are they high flyers or they average performers, for example. So you can actually match yung comparative ratio that you have. So anything below yung sa comparative ratio, anything below 70 to between 70 or 60%, that's already low talaga
Yeah.
for a lot of employees. So that means na pwede silang maging parang in the term of compensation, parang green circle yung mga yan. Green circle because they're falling below the minimum of the expected salary structure of the company.
Okay, and then for those who want to compute, learn how to compute the compa ratio, you need to enroll in CPHR or CHRP. Okay, because because yun lang yun, the formula. Okay,
The formulas for computing.
okay.
Madali
Oh,
naman, oh, madali. Ako, for example, pag nagtuturo ako ng comparative ratio, may ano yan, may exercises to para maintindihan ni employee, ano yung HR kung ano ibig sabihin ng nung comparative ratio.
so we already explained what the compa ratio, okay, is about. Okay, yon. So anyway, so there are also some concerns. Okay, so ito na ngayon, there's a new circular, okay, or a new presidential decree,
Mm,
okay, that we saw yesterday. Okay, so
mm,
nabulabog na naman kami. Okay, this is about yung December 24 and November 2. Okay, they're not holidays anymore. So no, I always tell people to always wait. There's always a succeeding announcement on that on pay rules, okay?
mm,
Or kasi it's only just February. I mean, it's the last days of February going to
mm,
March. Hindi natin alam baka magbago ulit. So,
mm.
but Ron, if ever, okay, so what will happen there? So December 24 and November 2, they're not holidays anymore. So pag pumasok ka,
Well, I think no, since parang gagawin siyang parang special non-working day, so ang treatment sa kanya is basically parang just like any regular day wherein mag apply ngayon yung sinasabi nating mga, well, of course, yung if they come to work, for example, yung rendering of OT, for example, would be so I think kung i-treat siya as parang regular day, so kung ano yung daily rate na naka-assign sa kanila. So since hindi na siya considered as a special holiday, wherein, di ba, special holiday is, you are allowed for, sorry, you are given premium pay when you are, coming to work on special day. So I think yun yung, yun yung mga, yun yung posibleng mawala. Although, I would agree with you to say na kailangan pa rin natin nung implementing rules for this one eh. Kasi medyo, for me, it's still vague at this point in terms of how it will be treated. Kasi medyo may implication siya sa previous practices, for example. So, kailangan ma-explain to ng maigi sa HR practitioners kasi I think as of now it's causing some confusion although hindi pa naman nangyayari in some of the days, no, pero I can already imagine there will be a lot of questions that will be thrown about this particular treatment
Kasi
of holiday.
in BPO companies, okay, in BPOs, this will have an impact because December 24 and November 2, usually you have duties, okay? So
Mm-hmm.
it's a irregular shift, okay?
Yeah.
So I guess that's where it's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Kasi yung mga tao, ay kung hindi pala ako mababayaran dyan, hindi na lang ako
Hindi na
magtrabaho.
papasok, oo.
Oo, parang ganun na.
Correct.
I'll just spend it with my family.
Correct.
Okay. Ganun ang thinking dyan. But again, remember that, okay, so, and then there's another day, I forgot which holiday what was that. So there are
Mm-hmm.
actually 3 days. And so the logic behind it is because there are so many holidays.
Mm-hmm.
So this day, retracting it as a holiday will of course have the companies, okay, encourage productivity or
Mm-hmm.
profits for the company, so to recover. So that's one of the measures of the government. For me
Correct.
kasi it's speculative kasi what will happen
Yep.
kasi uh, as a compensation person as well, okay, and of course somebody that heads HR, I wouldn't want to encourage or inflame people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, na oy ano, 'di ba? That's why I always say, guys, uso ang ano ngayon, ang because it's COVID, and when I say this line, uso ang bawian ngayon, it's because we are in very very strange times, okay?
Yeah.
So, but kasi ano, we have to really study our options before, okay, affecting, okay, salaries and benefits. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the message, or that's what we're trying to say here.
Yep.
So I would also suggest to our viewers, especially professionals and employees, when you get those advisories, to just read it as it is, and let's not have a heart attack.
Yeah, I think if you've been in HR for the longest time, parang you know that these things really come about eh. So parang it's nothing to really to be shocked, no, because ako I've seen things change every now and then. No? That's why I'm not anymore surprised na no. So ang hinihintay ko na lang diyan is ano yung treatment that will be, and what are the regulations about it. So I think Dole will have to also give some explanations about this in terms of the advisories probably.
Yes. And actually, it's the reason also, okay, so actually what we do naman here in HR Shouts, okay, we always have a very, our mindset here is actually when we get those advisories, we study it first, okay?
Yes.
That's why we are actually slow in posting it because we do have, and if it, they do have an effect.
Mm,
Okay, with people, okay? Kasi pag nalaman nila yon, and then when they go to work, 'di ba? Parang fired up na sila ng ano,
mm,
makipagbangayan sa HR, 'di ba?
correct.
So,
And
so
there are different scenarios kasi that can happen, and then every organization will have their respective parang implementations, for example. That's why it would be good to really analyze the advisory and then put the context in the company also.
yes, so that should be our perspective and how we should treat the advisories, okay, that we
Mm,
get from the HR forums.
yes.
So anyhow, okay, so we have like well, the questions have actually been answered, okay. Actually, people have been enlightened on salary, doing salary budgeting and how salary adjustments are treated, Ron.
Yes.
Okay, so would you have any promotions on seminars? Okay.
Well, yeah, I do have ano no. So let me just ano no, announce it na of course my book is available for download. So the HR Compass, which is my first publication, the 7 steps for starting your human resource department, and you can download the copy. It's an ebook copy already. So if you look at my back, no, I have the printed copy, which is the HR Compass, but you can download it already. You can go to our website. That's www.talentreachconsulting.com, and then there will be procedures there of how you can download. No, so the price of the ebook of the HR Compass is at 350 pesos. Okay, so I encourage you to purchase this because it contains the 7 steps of how you can set up your human resource department, as well as forms that you can use, especially for your HR practice. Yan. So, for an upcoming webinar that I will be conducting, I'm announcing also in March 27th. So that's this coming month. No, this we're already at March. No, by next week. No, so
Yes.
March 27, I'm conducting a webinar on writing effective HR policies and procedures. No? So this will be a 3-hour program courtesy of Talent Reach, which is our consulting company. So I hope you can spend the time to join us for that particular program. We're going to discuss how to be able to really put down into writing the important or the essential HR policies for the company. Yeah, so I'd encourage you to join and to check us out. You can check our Facebook also in Talent Reach if you'd like to know the schedules.
Okay. And Ron, okay, so those who asked questions, okay, by the way, okay, can get a free copy of HR Compass.
Yep.
So we have two, okay, we're sending it to two, okay, of our lucky question senders, which was Miss Ash, okay, and the first one, okay, her name starts with the letter C.
Let me see.
Oh, yeah. So there was Miss Ash and Carmela.
Carmela. Okay.
Okay, so we will be, so please get in touch with me. So I will be giving you your digital copies of Mr. Ron Turla's book.
Yep.
And also in the coming days, okay, so I invite people, okay, to please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is HR Shouts and Whispers, okay. So as you know, we have been doing this FB Live webinars, okay. And well, actually, just to tell you, okay, this will help, okay, us sustain our efforts in doing these talks. So I invite you to be a subscriber, and then you can view not just Mr. Ron Turla's episode today, okay, but also the past episodes. So anyhow, Ron, okay, I hope now I'm actually famished, okay, so it was also talking about numbers and salary, okay, made me hungry. I think you are too. So let's call it a night, okay,
Yep.
and enjoy the rest of the evening. Bye
Yeah.
bye.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye bye.